If you clicked on this video because you want to learn how to get top grades without spending all day studying like some YouTubers suggest, then you're in the right place. But honestly, I was like them, because years ago in my undergrad degree, I spent all day studying, thinking I was more productive than anyone else. But then I realized I actually want to have a life, not just study all day. So throughout the rest of my undergrad, my master's degree, and now at med school, I figured out how to study for only 2 hours a day, but still get top grades, so that I can spend the rest of my time doing things I actually care about. So I'll explain the 4 parts to what I call the diamond method. And each part works together so that you can learn more than 3 times as much in your study sessions. So let me start with a story you'll probably relate to. I was in my undergrad degree, getting ready for an exam, studying the most specific things about signaling pathways in pharmacology, and I spent a whole day on it. Now fast forward to the exam, and not a single question came up for anything I learned on that day. But when I look back, it's not really a surprise, because I took the wrong approach to learning. But something that revolutionized my approach to studying that's gonna fix yours too is to ask yourself this question. If you had an exam tomorrow and only 2 hours to study today, what would you do? I can guarantee that you won't be reading up on niche content, you won't be highlighting notes or just reading them. You'll do the more high yield things like practice questions or past papers. Because when you limit your time, you're more conscious of how you spend it and stick with what's actually important. So I prioritize what I learn. Instead of going through lectures in order, I look at practice questions and see what comes up the most and go through high yield topics first, and then go through other less important topics after. Or when I'm at hospital placement, I learn the conditions I see the most. So basically applying the 80-20 rule to focus on the 20% that covers 80% of the exams. So for you at school or uni, that's the bigger topics of your syllabus, or even the content your teacher or professor emphasizes in their PowerPoints or the questions they hand out. Okay, so you know what to prioritize and study, but now you're thinking, how do I study? So the best way to do this, regardless of what you study, is through active recall and spaced repetition. And I'll even take it a step further after I explain what these 2 things are if you don't already know. So normal active recall is taking a topic, making questions on that topic, and then testing yourself on those questions. And by forcing your brain to retrieve the information instead of just putting info into it, it means you actively learn instead of passively read it, giving it the name active recall. And spaced repetition is just doing these same questions at increasing intervals over time. But this normal way separates learning from studying, and I'll explain the problem with an example. When you're on TikTok or Instagram Reels, how often can you remember the TikTok or Reel you saw 4 swipes ago? Not often, right? You're mindlessly swiping away and forget. And that's how most people learn. They read paragraphs of content, not actively remembering what they're reading. And even when they make questions for active recall down the line, they aren't using this initial learning phase properly. And if you want to only study for 2 hours a day, here's what you have to do. You need to do what I call active synchronized recall, where you study at the same time you initially learn something. And it's gonna sound silly, but there's just 2 parts to this. The first is to just slow down a little bit. After you read a slide or paragraph for the first time, let your brain index the information and marinate in your head by actively thinking about it. And the second part is to read the topics in a bit more detail than you need to know. And it sounds counterintuitive, but that extra detail helps cement that core knowledge because of that extra active time you put in trying to understand the content rather than purely memorize it. So even if you forget that extra detail, you're more likely to remember that core knowledge. Like if I was learning the drug treatments for strokes, I'd look at the dose of the drugs as the extra detail. So do this to make that initial learning phase as effective as possible. Okay, now for this point, let's just be honest. How many times do you go over that same topic that you deep down know you already understand? Because I remember how in my undergrad, I was pretty confident in neuroscience, but not so much in clinical pharmacology. But the easy thing was to keep going over neuro and ignore the pharma, and that's what I did. But look, studying isn't meant to feel easy because it takes effort. But if you're going to spend time studying, then you might as well just do it properly. So what you should do is focus on your weaknesses. And the best way to do this is to learn horizontally and not vertically. But what does that mean? So normally we learn vertically. Like if I'm learning about heart attacks, I learn about the signs and symptoms of it, the investigations and the management. But it means I spend a lot of time learning about this one thing only and probably neglect another thing. But by learning horizontally, you cover your weak areas by linking topics together so that you see the bigger picture. For example, when I look at symptoms of heart attack like chest pain, I look at other cardiovascular causes of chest pain like pericarditis or aortic dissection and form a web at this level. And I do the same for every other level. And this builds that core understanding over a lot of topics, which again helps with that active learning process, because you spend more time processing similar concepts rather than going too deep into one isolated thing. And the next point isn't just for studying, but also for things like assignments. So we both know that most people at school or uni leave things to the last minute. Like someone you know or you might be one of the people that starts an assignment the day before a deadline, stressing on a group chat and asking a load of questions. But for the past 2 years, I've made it a point to myself to get any assignment done as soon as they're set, and I have good reasons to why I do this. The first is that because I get things done earlier, I just stress less and rush less, which means I just work with better focus. And I don't think I need to explain that, but the biggest benefit from getting things done early is that you end up leveraging or maximizing study momentum. The idea is when you start an assignment or study when there's still a lot of time to spare until the deadline, you end up thinking, oh, I've already finished but still got so much time left, so I might as well do some more work. And I can guarantee it's going to work for you, because what happens is when you set a goal of doing something ahead of everyone else, and when you meet that goal, you prove to yourself that you're capable of taking full control, unlike everyone else. And that alone is a pretty good drive for you to keep on going. Because if you're watching this, you want to get ahead of everyone else. And you will see that when the deadline's closing in and everyone's stressing, you're going to be there relaxed, doing things you actually want to do. So I'm sure you realize now that productivity is about doing things as efficiently as possible so that you can spend the rest of your time doing things you actually care about. But in this video, I only focused on maximizing productivity for studying at school or university. But a problem a lot of students have is with getting through assignments, like writing essays. And to be honest, I think students overcomplicate things when it comes to assignments. So in this video here, I'll talk about how you can easily write A+ essays in just a few hours. So click the video to see how I've been doing this for years so that you can get top grades for your assignments in less time.